Welcome to the Silent Hours Tales, where the darkness speaks. Beware what lurks in the shadows. The night was thick, heavier than usual, as if the darkness itself had weight. Lila stepped into her apartment, exhausted, expecting silence, but instead the air pressed down on her chest. The lights flickered momentarily, though she had just replaced every bulb. A shiver ran down her spine as the room felt alive in the absence of sound. From the corner of her eye, movement flickered. A shadow, too large to belong to anything normal, coiled across the walls like liquid darkness. Lila froze, heart hammering. The grandfather clock she had never noticed before chimed softly. 1, 2, 3. The ticks were uneven, echoing unnaturally through the apartment, as if counting her heartbeat. A fog began creeping across the floor, thick and cold, curling around her ankles. The shadows in the corners elongated, twisting into tall, faceless shapes that seemed aware of her every breath. Whispers brushed her ears, soft and coaxing at first. "Lila, we've been waiting." She stumbled back. The door wouldn't open, the handle spinning in her hand like it had a mind of its own. Another whisper, louder this time, sharper. "You cannot leave." The clock chimed again. 4, 5, 6. Each strike pulled the shadows closer. Their elongated limbs stretched unnaturally, gliding across the floor. The fog thickened, carrying the faint smell of damp earth and decay. She tried to scream, but her voice caught and only a hoarse whisper emerged. From the ceiling, the shadows descended slowly, twisting and turning as if alive. Lila's eyes darted toward the wall, and the whispers formed letters, glowing faintly red in the mist. "The midnight hour has come, and you are ours." The shadows pulsed with movement, some darting close only to vanish before they touched her. The clock's ticking sped up, a relentless rhythm that pressed against her skull. She fell to the floor, trembling, as a faint scraping came from the corner. A smaller figure, almost human, darted across the room, then merged with the darkness. Hours seemed to stretch. Lila lost track of time as the fog and shadows continued their dance. She saw visions, flashes of rooms she didn't recognize, corridors leading to impossible spaces, dark figures standing silently at impossible angles. Every time she blinked, something changed. The shadows shifted, always growing closer, their forms more defined, yet more horrifying. The whispers became a chorus, a chant barely audible but insistent, echoing through the apartment. The night does not sleep, the night consumes. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding slightly, the air pulsing with a life of its own. The shadows now moved with precision, as though circling her, anticipating her every move. She crawled backward, hands scraping the floor, fog curling around her fingers. A clock chimed again, 7, 8, 9, but this time it wasn't just the apartment. She felt it in her chest, deep, resonant like the heartbeat of the darkness itself. Her vision swam. For a moment she thought she saw her reflection in the fog, eyes black, skin pale, staring back at her with recognition that wasn't her own. The whispers shifted, forming words that burned in her mind even as she tried to cover her ears. "Do not resist. We are always here." Suddenly, the floor beneath her seemed to ripple. The shadows surged like waves, curling around her, rising to the ceiling, then collapsing, leaving her gasping in the heavy, cold fog. Her heart pounded. She tried to move, tried to escape, but every step forward brought her only deeper into the grasp of the darkness. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was somewhere else, or perhaps the same apartment, distorted. A faint red glow traced along the corners, illuminating figures she could not see clearly, yet could feel. Their presence pressed against her mind, whispering her fears, her regrets, memories she hadn't thought of in years. Time blurred. The clock ticked relentlessly. The shadows pulsed, danced, whispered, watched. Lila felt herself weakening, her will slipping as the darkness claimed the space around her. A cold hand brushed her shoulder, real yet intangible, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening chorus. You belong to the night forever. And then the apartment seemed to collapse in on itself, shadows folding into shadows, fog swallowing the corners, leaving only her breath, ragged and visible in the cold air. The clock chimed one last time, 12, and the night itself seemed to exhale. But she knew this was only the beginning. The darkness waited beyond the fog, beyond the shadows, patient. And when she fell asleep, if she dared, the whispers would return. The first part of the night had ended, but the terror would continue.
When Lila blinked, the apartment had changed. The walls were taller, the corners darker, the air heavier. Shadows moved independently, stretching and curling in ways that defied reason. Every breath she took felt thick, carrying whispers she could not ignore. She tried to stand, but her legs felt as if they were wading through water, resisting every step. A faint scratching echoed from the ceiling. She looked up. There was nothing, yet the sound was close, deliberate. Her heartbeat synced with it, a drum of rising panic. From the floor, a tendril of fog shot upward, wrapping around her ankle and climbing her leg, cold and oppressive. She pulled, screamed, but it held her, tighter, as if testing her resolve. The grandfather clock chimed again. 1, 2, 3, each strike reverberating through the room, though it had long ceased to exist in any logical sense. The shadows twisted in response to the chimes, forming humanoid figures that hunched, stretched, and contorted in impossible shapes. Their movements were synchronized, like dancers to a music only they could hear. The whispers returned, closer, louder, now forming words she could almost understand. You cannot leave. You belong to us. The night sees all. Lila crawled toward the only window in the room, but the glass rippled like liquid, refusing to let her escape. The shadows grew taller, some splitting into multiples, converging toward her. One leaned closer, and she could feel its presence in her mind, probing memories she had buried, fears she had long forgotten. The room seemed to stretch and warp. Hallways she didn't remember appeared in the corners, leading to darkness that pulsed with life. From one hallway came a faint red glow. She felt drawn to it, as if the shadows were guiding her, testing her sanity. She hesitated, but found her feet moving, walking toward the glow despite every instinct screaming to flee. In the hall, shadows clung to the walls, whispering in unison, "The night is patient, the night remembers." The glow intensified. Shapes appeared in it, figures she couldn't comprehend fully, faceless, elongated, hovering just above the floor, pulsating with a faint red light. Their movements were rhythmic, synchronized with the ticking that now filled the hallway, louder and faster, pounding in her skull. She ran. The hallway seemed endless, walls stretching with each step, shadows curling around her, hands brushing her shoulders, whispering her name. Lila, do not resist. A figure appeared ahead, humanoid but impossibly tall, its arms stretching to the ceiling and beyond. Its face was a void, yet she felt its gaze burn into her mind. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. The air thickened, every breath was laborious, each step heavier. Suddenly, the floor beneath her seemed to vanish, replaced by fog that swallowed her ankles, rising like liquid smoke. She fell forward into the mist, hands searching, and felt herself being lifted by invisible hands, spinning slowly as the shadows danced around her in a hypnotic rhythm. Then came the voices, all at once, forming a crescendo that rattled the air. The night claims all. The shadows grow. You cannot escape. Lila's vision swirled. She glimpsed rooms filled with memories that were not hers, corridors of laughter turned to screams, mirrors reflecting people she never knew, their faces twisted in silent horror. Each blink revealed new horrors, each breath carried whispers of judgment. The clock struck again, 4, 5, 6, and the shadows convulsed, stretching further, forming impossible geometries, weaving around her body. She could feel their cold tendrils on her skin, probing, teasing, testing. Her mind began to fracture, images of herself being swallowed by the fog, repeating over and over like a nightmare looping endlessly. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The shadows froze mid-motion. Silence enveloped the hallway, heavier than ever. Her body was shaking, limbs trembling, yet her mind felt sharp, aware, as if the pause in sound gave her a moment to understand the scale of what surrounded her. And then it began again, but faster. The shadows surged forward, the whispers returned, louder and more commanding. The red glow intensified, illuminating her entire vision. She saw movement, figures forming doors and passages that defied physics, twisting the apartment into a labyrinth of darkness. The fog rose in waves, obscuring everything but the glowing figures. Lila ran again, twisting through the hallways, the shadows following, the whispers chanting, echoing, consuming. Her feet sank into the mist, leaving no marks. Each step forward pulled her deeper into the labyrinth, each heartbeat a drum of terror. The whispers began to speak in unison, forming a chant. The night is eternal. The shadows never sleep. You belong to us. Hours passed, or minutes. Time had no meaning here. The shadows danced, the fog surged, and Lila's mind teetered on the edge of comprehension. Every door she opened led to another corridor, another room, another pulse of darkness. She realized the apartment had become a living entity, feeding on fear, growing stronger with each heartbeat. And yet, amid the terror, a strange clarity came. She felt that the shadows were testing her, guiding her, preparing her for something larger, something that awaited beyond the fog and the walls. A figure appeared directly in front of her, its presence overwhelming, faceless, radiating cold intent. It whispered in a voice that penetrated her thoughts. The first part of the night is over, but the shadows grow. The darkness will not end, not for you, not for anyone. And with that, the hallway stretched infinitely, shadows curling endlessly into the corners, the red glow pulsing rhythmically. Lila stood trembling, gasping for breath, realizing the night had only just begun and the terror would continue long past this hour, escalating, relentless, inescapable. The apartment had become unrecognizable. Corridors twisted impossibly, doors appeared where walls should have been, and shadows moved with a life of their own. Lila's breaths came in ragged gasps as she stumbled forward, trying to find something familiar. But familiarity had abandoned this place. The night had consumed it. The fog thickened, curling around her legs, climbing her arms. Each step forward was met with resistance, as if the shadows themselves were holding her back. Whispers filled her ears from every direction, chanting her name over and over. Lila, the night watches, the shadows hunger. She turned a corner, only to find a room she had never entered before. Its walls were covered in writing, glowing faintly red, pulsating with the rhythm of the shadows. Words shifted as she looked, forming sentences that made her stomach twist. The darkness remembers. The darkness consumes. You are part of it now. A chill ran down her spine. Figures began to emerge from the walls, tall, thin, their faces voids of blackness. They didn't move like normal creatures. Their limbs stretched, bending and folding in impossible angles, gliding silently toward her. Each one exuded a cold intent, a hunger that pressed against her mind. The floor beneath her began to ripple like liquid. She stumbled, caught in the fog, and realized that she was no longer in control of her movements. The shadows guided her, pushing her toward a staircase that spiraled infinitely upward. Each step seemed to stretch time, making her legs ache, her heart race, until she felt she had climbed for hours, though only moments had passed. At the top, a figure waited, a shadow taller than the ceiling, with eyes glowing a faint, menacing red. It reached out, and for a moment Lila felt a pull in her chest, as if her soul itself was being drawn toward it. The whispers became louder, forming a chorus that echoed in her mind. "You cannot escape. The night claims all." She screamed, but the sound was absorbed by the fog. Her surroundings shifted again. Hallways led to rooms filled with mirrors, each reflection showing a version of herself she did not recognize. Eyes black, skin pale, expressions twisted in silent horror. She tried to avert her gaze, but the reflections followed, mocking, whispering, reminding her of fears she had long buried. Suddenly, a soft, almost gentle light appeared at the end of a corridor. Against her better judgment, she moved toward it. The shadows recoiled slightly as she approached, though the whispers persisted, softer now, coaxing her back. "Do not follow. Do not awaken." The light grew brighter, revealing a room filled with clocks, grandfather clocks, wall clocks, even small pocket watches suspended in mid-air. Each tick was uneven, some fast, some slow, echoing unnaturally, creating a dissonance that made her head spin. From each clock, shadows spilled, merging into larger forms, circling her, pressing against her, yet unable to touch. A chill hand gripped her shoulder. She spun around, but the space behind her stretched infinitely, corridors folding into each other, doors appearing and disappearing at random. The whispers intensified. "The shadows are patient. The night remembers." From the fog emerged smaller figures, darting quickly, whispering directly into her mind. "You belong. You are ours. Resistance is futile." Her breath quickened. Every heartbeat matched the pulse of the shadows. The fog rose higher, thick and suffocating, and the walls of the apartment seemed to fold, stretch, and collapse simultaneously. She tried to scream, to run, to fight, but the night had claimed her movements. She was a puppet, dragged through a maze that was alive, conscious, hungry. Then she noticed the writing on the walls again, glowing red. "Those who enter the labyrinth will never leave." The shadows surged forward in a wave, curling around her feet, climbing her arms. Lila closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the mirrors reflected not just herself, but a crowd of faceless observers, all silently watching her, waiting. Hours or seconds passed. She couldn't tell. The night itself had no sense of time. Each step, each breath, each whisper drove her deeper into madness. Yet she knew she had to keep moving, to survive, to see what lay at the end of this endless labyrinth of shadows. And through it all, one thought echoed louder than the whispers, louder than the ticking of the countless clocks. The night never ends. The shadows grow, and you are not alone. Lila ran forward, the corridors folding endlessly before her, the shadows pressing, twisting, and the whispers continuing, dragging her deeper into a night from which there would be no dawn. The labyrinth had swallowed Lila completely. Each step she took seemed to bend reality itself. The corridors twisted, the ceilings stretched impossibly high, and shadows clung to every corner, moving independently as if alive. The air was thick with fog, curling around her ankles and rising slowly, carrying whispers that gnawed at the edges of her mind. She stumbled into a large chamber she had never seen before. Its walls were lined with mirrors, reflecting not her own image, but countless faceless figures watching silently. Their eyes, if they could be called that, were voids of black, yet she could feel their gaze boring into her very soul. A soft ticking began, uneven and distorted, echoing through the room. The grandfather clock she had seen before now stood at the center, impossibly tall, its hands spinning backwards. With each tick, the shadows advanced, stretching unnaturally,
some curling around the mirrors, forming shapes that twisted into impossible geometries. The whispers became voices, chanting in unison. The night claims all. The shadows never rest. You are ours. She backed away, slipping on the thick fog that now seemed almost solid. The figures in the mirrors began to step out, tall, thin, with elongated limbs, moving in perfect silence. One reached toward her, its hand passing through the fog, cold as ice, brushing her shoulder. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed instantly by the shadows. The floor beneath her rippled. She fell forward, hands scraping against the slick surface, feeling herself pulled deeper into the chamber. The shadows multiplied, coiling around each other, their forms merging, stretching, dividing, creating an ever-growing mass of darkness. Lila's eyes darted around, trying to find an escape, but the mirrors reflected corridors that didn't exist, rooms that twisted impossibly, ceilings that bent like waves. Each reflection was alive, shifting, showing glimpses of her deepest fears. Empty rooms, endless staircases, eyes in the walls, hands reaching from the floor. A cold hand gripped her wrist. She spun, but nothing was there. Yet the fog curled tighter around her, and the shadows whispered in her mind, "You cannot leave. The night never ends." The grandfather clock chimed violently, each strike echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. 1, 2, 3. The shadows pulsed with the rhythm, undulating, advancing closer. Lila felt herself being drawn towards the center, towards the clock, as if it were a vortex pulling her soul. She tried to resist, but every movement was slowed, impeded by unseen forces. Whispers escalated into a chorus, chanting her name over and over, mixing with the distorted ticking. The heart of darkness grows, the night consumes, you belong. The mirrors began to crack, thin lines spreading across their surfaces. From each crack, red light leaked, illuminating the figures lurking in the fog. They reached through the cracks, hands grasping, twisting, merging with the shadows in the chamber. The fog became almost tangible, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Her vision blurred, shapes emerged from the corners, smaller now, nimble, darting figures whispering directly into her mind. Do not resist, do not awaken. Lila stumbled to the center of the chamber, now completely surrounded. The floor rippled again, folding into itself, and she felt herself falling, not down, not up, but through a void where time had no meaning. The whispers intensified, merging into a deafening chorus. The shadows are eternal. The night remembers. The darkness claims all. And in the center of the void, the clock loomed impossibly large, its hands spinning, ticking, counting down, or was it counting up? A presence rose from the shadows, immense, faceless, radiating a cold intent that pressed against her mind, a force of absolute terror. The heart of darkness has awakened, it whispered directly in her mind, and now you belong to the night. Lila collapsed to her knees in the fog, gasping, trembling, the shadows curling tighter, pulsating with a life of their own. The mirrors reflected not just herself, but countless versions of her, each one screaming silently, each one trapped in the same endless cycle of darkness. The ticking slowed. The shadows paused for a heartbeat, stretching taller, merging with the fog, filling the chamber entirely. And then, with a violent shudder, the night continued, relentless, unbroken, as if nothing had happened. Lila realized with cold certainty that the heart of darkness had only just begun to claim her. The whispers would not stop, the shadows would not rest, and the night, eternal, patient, unyielding, would continue. The labyrinth had grown more twisted than ever. Corridors stretched into infinity, walls shifted subtly, and the fog thickened, curling around Lila's ankles and rising like living fingers. Every step she took seemed to echo through some unseen dimension, carrying whispers that penetrated her mind. We are watching, always. You cannot hide. She moved cautiously, each movement deliberate, yet the shadows reacted instantly. Figures emerged from the corners, tall, thin, faceless, but now with faint glowing red veins running along their limbs. They circled her silently, a synchronized dance of terror that seems to mock her fear. The mirrors returned, lining every wall she passed. Each reflection showed her differently, sometimes younger, sometimes older, sometimes twisted beyond recognition, screaming silently in their glass prisons. She tried to look away, but the reflections followed, eyes burning into her soul, whispering, "The Watchers never sleep. The night remembers. You belong." A clock chimed somewhere distant. 1, 2, 3. Its sound was warped, stretching into echoes that filled the entire labyrinth. Lila shivered as the shadows twitched in rhythm with the ticking, forming shapes that leaned impossibly over her, arms stretching beyond reason. The fog thickened into walls of mist, swirling violently, obscuring the floor. Lila could barely see her hands in front of her, yet she felt movement everywhere. Tiny figures darted through the fog, whispering directly into her thoughts. "Do not resist. Do not awaken." She stumbled forward into a large hall she hadn't seen before. The ceiling was impossibly high, fading into darkness. Shadows clung to the walls, writhing, pulsing, as if the air itself had become alive. The floor rippled beneath her feet, bending like liquid. She fell, hands gripping the slick surface, and felt herself being dragged deeper into the labyrinth. Voices rose around her, forming a chorus of whispers and screams intertwined, echoing in her skull. "The endless Watchers are patient. They see all. You cannot escape." From the corners of the hall, faceless figures emerged, tall, elongated, bending at impossible angles. They moved without sound, yet she could feel their presence pressing against her mind, probing, teasing, testing. Each step she took forward only brought her further into their grasp. The grandfather clock appeared suddenly at the far end of the hall. It loomed impossibly large, its hands spinning backward and forward simultaneously. The ticking synced with the pulsing shadows, now taller, stretching toward the ceiling, reaching for her with elongated arms. Lila tried to run, but the floor itself resisted. She was slipping through some force, guided, trapped, unable to escape. The mirrors around her fractured, red light spilling from the cracks, illuminating the countless Watchers circling her. Each reflection showed her different horrors, rooms filled with screaming faces, corridors twisting into infinity, shadows crawling along the walls. A whisper rose above the others, cold, commanding, resonating deep in her mind. "The Watchers claim all. The night never ends. You belong to us." The fog swirled violently, and suddenly a wave of shadows surged toward her. She fell, gasping, the cold tendrils brushing her skin, wrapping her like a living blanket. Her heart pounded, matching the rhythm of the pulsing shadows, the warped ticking, the whispers chanting in unison. Time lost meaning. Each corridor she entered became another, stretching endlessly. Mirrors reflected Watchers she couldn't see directly, shadows she couldn't name, and whispers that tore at her mind. The labyrinth had grown sentient, aware, hungry, and she was its prey. A large figure appeared before her, faceless, immense, radiating cold intent. Its presence pressed into her mind, consuming her thoughts, forcing memories and fears to the surface. She realized then that the Watchers were not just observing, they were shaping reality around her, bending the apartment, the fog, the shadows, even her own perception. And yet, amidst the suffocating terror, a single thought pierced her consciousness. The night is eternal, the Watchers grow, and you cannot escape. Lila's legs trembled as the shadows coiled tighter, the fog surged higher, and the whispers rose into a deafening chorus. She was no longer alone. The labyrinth itself was alive, and the endless watchers surrounded her from every corner, every mirror, every fold in the darkness. The heart of the night had claimed her, and there was no dawn in sight. The labyrinth had fully claimed Lila. Every corridor she entered bent impossibly, walls stretching, ceilings curling into darkness. The fog clung to her skin, icy and suffocating, moving like fingers, twisting around her arms, legs, even her neck. Every step she took felt heavier, every breath a struggle against the oppressive air. Whispers surrounded her, closer than ever, now forming words she could hear clearly. The night sees all. The shadows know. You cannot escape. She stumbled into a hallway lined with mirrors. Her reflection was no longer just herself. It was multiple Lilas, each twisted, screaming silently, eyes hollow, expressions frozen in terror. The mirrors began to crack, thin red lines glowing faintly, revealing figures emerging from within. Shadows spilled forth, elongating, merging, circling her in a precise predatory dance. The ticking of countless clocks filled the air, uneven and distorted, echoing in her skull. Some ticked fast, others slow, creating a rhythm that made her heart pound violently. She tried to run, but the floor beneath her rippled like water, bending and folding with every step. The shadows followed, pushing her forward, deeper into the unknown. From the corners of the labyrinth, small, nimble figures darted, whispering directly into her mind. Do not resist, do not awaken, belong to the night. A massive, faceless figure appeared at the end of the hallway, arms stretching impossibly to the ceiling, its presence radiating a cold, absolute power. Lila felt herself drawn towards it, her legs moving without her consent, guided by invisible hands. The fog swirled violently, wrapping around her like a living blanket, the whispers crescendoing into a deafening chorus. The mirrors reflected impossible rooms, corridors stretching into infinity, endless staircases, doors opening to nowhere. The watchers within them observed her, motionless yet all-seeing. Each step she took led her further into the heart of the labyrinth, deeper into the shadows. The grandfather clock loomed again, impossibly large, its hands spinning both backward and forward. The shadows pulsed with its rhythm, growing taller, more defined, reaching towards her, wrapping the fog around her like coils of black smoke. The night is eternal. The shadows grow. You cannot hide. The whispers became almost unbearable, hammering in her mind, forcing memories of fear, regret, and terror to the surface. Her body trembled as the fog rose to her chest, the shadows tightening, merging, forming a wall of darkness that blocked every exit. She tried to scream, to fight, to resist, but her voice was absorbed, her movements resisted by invisible forces. Suddenly, the corridor shifted violently. Lila stumbled, falling into a void where walls, mirrors, and shadows merged into an infinite pulsating darkness. Faceless watchers moved within the fog, circling, observing, testing her will. A chill hand brushed her shoulder, and she gasped, realizing with horror that she was no longer in control. The shadows guided her, probing her mind, showing glimpses of herself trapped in endless loops of fear, each one screaming silently. The grandfather clock chimed again, 7, 8, 9. The shadows pulsed with each strike, expanding and folding, reaching from walls to ceiling to floor. She realized that the labyrinth itself was alive, sentient, feeding on her terror, growing stronger with every heartbeat, every whisper. Time no longer existed. Each step she took led to new horrors, corridors filled with red glowing mist, mirrors reflecting impossible shapes, whispers echoing from all directions. The night itself pressed in, patient, eternal, unyielding. And yet, in the suffocating darkness, one thought became clear. The labyrinth is endless, the shadows never sleep, and the night has claimed you. Lila's knees buckled, the fog curling higher, wrapping around her like a shroud. The whispers rose into a deafening crescendo, the shadows coiling tighter, the mirrors fracturing further, as if the very walls were alive. The night had fully consumed her, and she understood there would be no dawn. The terror would continue, relentless, infinite, unstoppable. The labyrinth no longer resembled an apartment or anything remotely human. Corridors twisted in impossible angles, ceilings arched into darkness, and shadows moved as though alive, curling and stretching with intent. The fog was thicker than ever, cold and heavy, wrapping around Lila's limbs and seeping into her lungs with every breath. Whispers surged, overlapping, a cacophony of voices chanting, "The night watches, the shadows hunger, you are ours." She moved forward cautiously, each step pulling her deeper into a maze that obeyed no logic. The mirrors along the walls reflected horrors that defied explanation. Countless Lilas screaming silently, faces twisted in fear, some without eyes, some with mouths sewn shut. Each reflection was alive, watching, waiting. A clock chimed somewhere, distant yet deafening, each strike sending ripples through the shadows. 1, 2, 3. The shadows moved in rhythm, stretching, bending, circling her in a silent, precise dance. Small, nimble figures darted through the fog, whispering directly into her mind. "Do not resist. Do not awaken. The night consumes." The corridor stretched infinitely. Lila stumbled, tripping on the fog that now swirled like liquid. She felt herself lifted, guided by invisible hands through the twisting maze. Every corridor led to another, each filled with mirrors, shadows, and whispers. The labyrinth was alive, sentient, and it had fully claimed her. A massive figure appeared, faceless, arms stretching impossibly, towering above the fog. Its presence pressed cold into her mind, probing memories, dredging fears long buried. The whispers crescendoed, echoing in every corner. The pulse of shadows grows, the night remembers, resistance is futile. The fog pulsed with each heartbeat. Lila tried to run, but the floor undulated like water, the shadows guiding her steps, ensuring she moved toward the center of the labyrinth. The mirrors fractured, red light leaking from the cracks, illuminating countless figures circling, observing, and closing in. Her vision swirled. She glimpsed endless hallways, each leading to rooms that shouldn't exist, filled with distorted reflections of herself, screaming, writhing, lost. The whispers intensified. "You belong. The night claims all. We are eternal." Time became meaningless. Every breath, every step, every heartbeat seemed to stretch into infinity. The shadows coiled, expanded, merged, forming towering, impossible structures of darkness that bent reality. The fog enveloped her, each tendril of mist brushing her skin like icy fingers, whispering secrets of terror she could barely comprehend. Suddenly, the grandfather clock appeared before her, impossibly massive, hands spinning in chaotic directions. The shadows pulsed with each tick, stretching into the ceiling, curling around the mirrors, and converging toward her. She fell to her knees, gasping, the fog tightening, the whispers reaching a deafening pitch. One thought echoed in her mind, louder than the rest. The night is eternal, the shadows never sleep, and you are not alone. The labyrinth twisted further, corridors folding upon themselves, mirrors fracturing, red light spilling everywhere. Lila felt herself shrinking within the darkness, consumed by the shadow's presence, the fog, and the whispers. The pulse of the labyrinth itself beat in time with her heart, a relentless rhythm that promised there would be no escape, no dawn, and no relief.
And as she trembled, surrounded by the faceless watchers and impossible geometry of the maze, she knew with certainty the night was infinity, the shadows eternal, and she was only beginning to understand the depths of the terror that awaited. The labyrinth's corridors had grown ever more twisted, folding in on themselves in impossible angles. The fog pressed heavier against Lila's skin, curling around her legs and arms like living serpents. Every breath felt suffocating, and the whispers surged louder, overlapping, forming an almost unbearable cacophony. The shadows gather. The night sees all. You are ours. She stumbled forward, guided yet trapped by the invisible hands of the labyrinth. Mirrors lined the walls, each reflecting impossible versions of herself, some screaming silently, others with hollow eyes, mouths twisted into grimaces that she had never imagined. The reflections moved independently, mimicking her fear and multiplying it. The ticking of unseen clocks filled the air, uneven and distorted, echoing through the corridors. 1, 2, 3. Each strike sent ripples through the shadows, stretching them taller, bending them impossibly, pressing closer, circling her in synchronized predatory rhythm. Figures emerged from the fog, tall, thin, faceless, but now they began to gather, forming clusters that moved with purpose. Their glowing red veins pulsed in time with the distant ticking, and the air was filled with their silent, suffocating intent. The whispers drilled into her mind. The night is patient. The shadows hunger. Resistance is futile. She ran through corridors that twisted impossibly, walls bending, ceilings curling, fog thickening, swallowing the floor beneath her. Smaller, shadowy figures darted around her, whispering secrets, probing fears, and dragging memories of terror from her mind. Do not resist. Do not awaken. The night consumes. At the center of the labyrinth, a chamber opened, a vast hall filled with mirrors, clocks, and shadows. The walls pulsed as if breathing. Figures coalesced, gathering in synchronized waves, their elongated limbs curling around the room, merging and stretching with the fog. The grandfather clock stood at the far end, impossibly tall, hands spinning in chaotic directions, each tick sending tremors through the chamber. Lila's heart pounded as the shadows circled her tighter. The mirrors fractured, red light spilling from the cracks, illuminating faceless watchers in every corner. The whispers became a deafening chorus, repeating a singular message. You belong. The night claims all. Eternity awaits. Her legs buckled under the weight of fear and exhaustion, the fog rising higher, curling around her chest, restricting her movements. The shadows lunged forward, coiling around her body, and yet she remained conscious, aware, trapped in the center of a gathering far greater than she could comprehend. The labyrinth itself seemed alive now, pulsing, bending reality, feeding on her terror, growing stronger with every heartbeat. The reflections in the mirrors became more numerous, some stretching into impossible forms, others screaming silently, their voices absorbed into the fog. Time no longer existed. Lila could not tell if minutes or hours had passed. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement echoed in the chamber as the shadows swelled, gathering into a collective presence, pulsing in rhythm with the ticking of the grandfather clock. A faceless figure emerged at the center, immense, arms outstretched, its presence pressing into her mind, unraveling her thoughts, dragging fear to the surface, and whispering directly, "The night is eternal, the shadows grow, the gathering is complete, and you belong." Lila fell to her knees, trembling, the fog curling higher, the shadows coiling tighter, the whispers reaching a deafening crescendo. The labyrinth had claimed her fully, and she understood with cold certainty the night was endless, the
the Watchers eternal, and her terror would continue without pause, spiraling ever deeper into the heart of darkness.
The labyrinth had become infinite. Every corridor she entered bent and twisted beyond comprehension, shadows curling along the walls, fog thick and suffocating. Lila's breaths came ragged and shallow, each inhalation carrying whispers that seemed to pierce her mind. The echoes of fear will follow. You cannot hide. You are ours. The mirrors were everywhere now, reflecting not only her image but countless versions of herself, each twisted, screaming silently, their eyes hollow, expressions of terror frozen. Each reflection moved independently, reaching out from their glass prisons, stretching their shadows toward her. The ticking of clocks echoed in distorted rhythms, some too fast, some too slow, creating a disorienting cadence that rattled her mind. 1, 2, 3. Each tick sent waves of darkness rippling through the corridors, stretching and curling the shadows, guiding them ever closer to her. The fog rose higher, thickening, twisting into shapes that mimicked her movements. Small, shadowy figures darted around her, whispering secrets, dredging up fears, tormenting her mind. Do not resist. Do not awaken. The night remembers. She stumbled into a vast chamber, larger than any she had seen, where the shadows were almost tangible, coiling and writhing across the floor and walls. The mirrors lined the chamber in concentric circles, fracturing reality with each reflection. Every fractured surface revealed faceless watchers, their presence oppressive, omnipresent. The grandfather clock stood at the center, impossibly large, hands spinning in chaotic, unpredictable directions. The shadows pulsed with each tick, stretching upward, pressing down from the ceiling, curling along the floor, moving as a single cohesive mass. The whispers converged, forming a chorus that seemed to echo from every corner of the labyrinth. You belong. The night sees all. Eternity awaits. Lila's heart pounded violently, her knees buckling beneath her. The fog rose higher, enveloping her entirely, tendrils curling around her. The shadows lunged, twisting, merging, coiling around her, yet she remained conscious, trapped in their grasp. Time lost all meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. Every heartbeat, every breath, every step echoed endlessly in the chamber. The Watchers moved in perfect synchronization, their presence a pulse, a rhythm, a heartbeat of the labyrinth itself. Suddenly, a massive, faceless figure emerged, larger than any shadow she had seen before, arms stretching impossibly, its presence pressing cold and absolute into her mind. The whispers intensified, merging into a deafening chorus. The echoes of fear are eternal. The night claims all. You cannot escape. The mirrors fractured violently, red light spilling from each crack, illuminating countless watchers emerging from the fog, their elongated limbs curling impossibly around the chamber. The shadows coiled tighter, pulsing in rhythm with the ticking, wrapping the fog into a living, suffocating shroud. Lila's heart raced violently, memories of terror, regret, and fear flooding to the surface by the presence surrounding her. The labyrinth had become alive, sentient, feeding on her terror, growing stronger with every heartbeat. And in the center of the chaos, one thought echoed with undeniable clarity. The night is eternal, the shadows are infinity, and you are only beginning to understand true fear. The fog surged violently, the shadows coiled ever tighter, and the whispers rose into a deafening crescendo, promising that the labyrinth, the Watchers, and the eternal night would continue, relentless, unbroken, and unstoppable. Lila stumbled forward through the endless corridors of the labyrinth, her body trembling, her lungs burning, her mind fraying under the weight of the shadows. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself had become a physical force pressing her down, dragging her deeper into the nightmare. The fog was nearly waist-high now, curling around her like serpents, cold and suffocating. The whispers surrounded her, louder, more insistent, echoing in every corner of the infinite maze. The eternal night. The shadows grow. You are ours. She tried to run, but the corridors twisted impossibly, bending in ways that defied logic. Doors appeared where walls had been. Mirrors reflected impossible images of herself. Countless Lilas trapped in silent screams, their faces contorted in terror. Each reflection moved independently, stretching, twisting, reaching out from the glass. The ticking of clocks filled the air, uneven and chaotic, some too fast, some too slow, creating a disorienting rhythm that made her head spin. 1, 2, 3. Each strike sent tremors through the shadows, which coiled and merged, forming massive, undulating shapes that seemed alive. Figures emerged from the fog, tall, faceless, elongated, with faint red veins pulsing through their forms. They moved with purpose, circling her, merging, splitting, surrounding her entirely. Tiny, nimble figures darted around her, whispering directly into her mind. Do not resist. Do not awaken. Belong to the night. She stumbled into a vast chamber at the heart of the labyrinth. Its walls were mirrors, its ceiling stretched beyond sight, and the floor rippled like liquid under her feet. The shadows were denser here, thicker, almost solid, and the fog rose higher, coiling around her body like a living shroud. At the center of the chamber loomed the grandfather clock, massive, impossibly tall, its hands spinning chaotically. With each tick, the shadows pulsed violently, surging outward like waves of darkness, curling around the fog, coiling over mirrors, bending reality itself. Lila felt herself lifted, guided, trapped, every movement controlled by the labyrinth. Her mind screamed, yet the shadows consumed every sound, every thought. Whispers erupted into a chorus, deafening, echoing. The eternal night, the shadows never sleep. You are ours. She looked up and saw them, countless faceless figures rising from every corner, merging into titanic shapes, filling the chamber with a presence so vast it pressed on her mind. Red light spilled from cracks in the mirrors, illuminating figures she could not name, creatures that seemed to exist outside reality. The whispers became words she could almost understand. Those who enter the labyrinth, those who feel the pulse of shadows, belong forever. The fog twisted violently, rising above her head, enveloping her entirely. The shadows coiled, pulsating with the rhythm of the grandfather clock, tightening, pressing, merging into a single colossal entity. Lila's body trembled, her knees buckling, yet her mind remained conscious, absorbing every detail of the eternal nightmare. She realized then the truth. The labyrinth was alive, sentient, a predator feeding on fear, growing stronger with every heartbeat. The watchers, the reflections, the shadows were extensions of it, endless, patient, eternal, and she was its prey. Suddenly, the mirrors shattered violently, red shards floating mid-air like suspended blades. From the cracks emerged infinite figures, each faceless, each reaching, each whispering her name in voices that sliced through her mind. The fog swirled into a cyclone, pulling her towards the center, towards the massive shadow-formed entity that had emerged from the abyss. The eternal night, the shadows, your fear, we consume all. Her screams were absorbed by the darkness. She tried to resist, to fight, to move, but every step, every motion, every breath was guided by the labyrinth itself. Her vision blurred. She saw endless corridors stretching into infinity, mirrors reflecting impossibilities, shadows moving independently of the laws of physics, whispering secrets she was never meant to hear.
Then a silence fell. For a heartbeat, nothing moved, nothing whispered. The shadows froze, the fog hung motionless, and the chamber seemed suspended in time. Lila's mind clung desperately to that silence, believing she had found a moment of reprieve. But it was only the calm before the storm. The shadows surged violently, faster, larger, coiling around her body. The mirrors exploded into fragments, each one reflecting endless watchers, each one a doorway into another layer of the labyrinth. The whispers returned, a deafening, incomprehensible chorus. The eternal night consumes all. You belong. She felt herself drawn upward, lifted above the fog, the shadows coiling beneath her like living ropes. The clock's hands spun faster, faster, each tick a hammer against her skull, resonating through the entire labyrinth. Her body was suspended, her mind tearing at the edges of comprehension, yet she could not escape. And in that moment, she understood. The night would never end. The shadows would never sleep. The whispers would follow her forever. The labyrinth, alive and infinite, had claimed her completely. The fog swallowed her entirely. The shadows merged into an impenetrable mass. Mirrors shattered, clocks spun endlessly, whispers echoed eternally. And Lila, trembling, gasping, swallowed by darkness, realized she was no longer herself. She was part of the labyrinth now, a whisper among whispers, a shadow among shadows, eternal, inescapable. The night continued, the watchers continued, and the story of Silent Hour's tales had reached its terrifying conclusion. Yet the eternal night waited for the next soul foolish enough to enter.